Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to continue in our Cloud Talk series, where we're going to go into kind of part two of the Oracle at Oracle experience. Last time we shared a little bit about the planning of what was done as Oracle has moved a lot of its own application properties from either on-premise or more in particular private clouds or non-public cloud workloads to the Oracle Cloud infrastructure. We know that's something that many of our ISV partners are doing as well. And with Oracle being one of the largest ISVs in the world, felt that it was good background material for many of you, as we often get that question. And today we'll continue on with that. As we'll be talking today, they will all be public and live information we'll be sharing. But just in case, as I always like to start with, if we do share anything that's a little bit outside of bounds or future looking, please do refer back to Oracle's Safe Harbor statement. But again, what Matt and I will be sharing with you today is current and available for all of our partners to use and work with Oracle today. So for our agenda today, I'll start off with a brief introduction for those of you that haven't joined us before that shares a little bit about what the Oracle Cloud is specifically for our ISV partners and why and what kind of partners are actually choosing OCI as a platform for their solutions. As I mentioned, I'll be joined by Matt Shivers, Senior Director of Business Development, where he'll share some of the processes of how Oracle itself has moved our applications to OCI in the public cloud. And then we'll end with some additional resources, but more importantly, next steps we'd like to take with you, based on what we share today and how we can get you into the path to the cloud with Oracle Cloud infrastructure as well. I always like to start with a little bit about really what we hear from our partners around their key objectives and why they're moving to the cloud and how Oracle actually addresses these different categories specifically for you. Obviously, the first we hear from a lot of people is they're looking for cost reduction, whether that's another public cloud, or maybe you actually have your own private, data centers, colos, and we know that that's expensive as well. So with cost reduction, we routinely hear from our partners that we save them at least 30%, and we've proven it time and time again. I can share some examples with you later, about being, up to and even greater than 30% less expensive, than the competition. It really will reduce for you a lot of your operational costs, depending upon which services you use, around, things like human capital as well. And Oracle has also come up with some very flexible, easy to use, and easy to understand pricing and consumption models, which I'll go into here in another slide. But again, a good way for you to have price certainty and cost control as well. So cost reduction can be very important, but if you get something cheaper and it's actually not workable for you, that doesn't actually do anything for your business. So it's also very important to scale and performance. And again, routinely, through work with, hundreds and thousands of ISVs, we find ourselves up to 5 times faster than other public clouds. And when you get into certain kinds of workloads, such as, high performance computing, with what we've done with our Generation 2 Oracle Cloud infrastructure, around things like compute, storage, and networking, we find even greater increases in performance, for our partners. And again, none of that is worthwhile to you unless it's always available and always works. So we'll talk a little bit about the industry-leading service level agreements that Oracle has around availability, performance, and manageability, something, again, very unique in the industry. We also know for ISV partners, security and data protection is paramount. It's important to everybody in the cloud, but you're running, production applications with multiple customers, and your application is your business. So having a secure product that's been built from the ground up, gives you, different types of and very comprehensive access controls, monitoring, auditing tools, and separate cloud control planes and computers from the actual workload is going to be very important and give you that reliability, to trust your application in the public cloud and something you can go out to your customers with. Those all kind of help how your product runs. They help, the performance side of it. They help the cost of it. kind of your bottom line top aspects. What's very important as well is the top line. Great to, manage costs and, have good performance. But if you can actually expand your business as well, we think that's a home run for all of us. So on, the ability to work with Oracle, you have access to Oracle's over 200,000 SaaS customers worldwide, companies that either you can integrate into those same products and market to them, or just knowing the companies are already, running their applications in the cloud gives you the ability to have, a ready-made prospecting base for you. Obviously, Oracle's seeing, well in excess of 80 million daily users, and now over 70 billion transactions daily in the cloud. Gives you some, ability to understand if this can run for Oracle, has the ability to support your workloads and customers as well. And really what it's leading to, is 100% year-over-year OCI customer growth. And we're actually seeing even greater growth in the production ISV applications onboarding to the Oracle Cloud. So again, no better, I think, way to show, the proof point and availability of the cloud to run your business versus customers actually coming into production with us. And of course, Oracle's got one of the greater footprints now, expanding to over 36 data center regions worldwide, so that you have the ability to expand into other countries and regions, as well as have solid resources, things like disaster recovery and high availability by working with Oracle. And really, if we talk about what the Oracle Cloud is, we can kind of put it into, 3 layers for you. And it is a little bit different than what you'll hear from some other public cloud providers, just based on what Oracle itself has actually done. I'll talk about these briefly and highlight them. And even though, the top is where you as our partners play, let me kind of start at the core services, or in most cases, what you would consider as the infrastructure, as a service. So of course, you're going to expect and have things delivered for you, such as compute, network, and storage. But Oracle's also bringing in additional, resources around things like autonomous database, both for OLTP and data warehousing. And we'll talk a little bit about autonomous here in a second and what that brings to you. As you move up the stack, where Oracle starts to differentiate itself along with autonomous, you really get into more of the platform or the developer services. So what we give you for app development and native cloud development, integration tools, both to work with Oracle applications and other third-party and custom products as well. Very deep and rich analytics, and data warehousing solutions, and of course, enhanced and expanded security features, so depending upon what you want above and beyond what's just built into the core platform, that's available to you as well. Where I really want to stop for a second, though, is the application side of it. One, I toss out the Oracle piece here around what we do in ERP, supply chain, human capital, customer experience, obviously NetSuite, and then our industry or global business units, which we'll talk about later in Matt's segment. You can see that Oracle actually is, one of the largest application SaaS providers itself. What we have actually built in terms of infrastructure and platform as a service was done to be enterprise ready and to run applications. It's exactly why we did it. And as a result, what we're now doing is we're opening up that and offering the exact same platform that we run to our partners as well. And you can see just a few here, Zoom for video conferencing that we're using today. Workforce software, advanced time and attendance, integrates in with our human capital product. Manhattan Associates, supply chain, warehouse management, Cisco Tetration, workload management and security products, and Altar around graphics simulation. So you can kind of see this going across everything from security to business applications, to 3D rendering, and shows the breadth and the type of partners that are actually adopting Oracle's solution today. Let me just highlight a couple last things before we get to Matt here. And I really do like to talk about, again, differentiated capabilities in Oracle Cloud for ISVs. We obviously talk a lot about the benefits for our customers, but I actually want to talk to you more in particular here. We've already hit on the price performance. And again, I will challenge you at the end of some next steps to where we won't just tell you about the price performance that we see, but we'll actually give you the opportunity to come experience it with us as well. But we routinely, see these types of, performance gains from our partners. I mentioned enterprise SLAs. Let me stop there for a second. What you get from other cloud providers is really what we call availability, and that's, is the service up or not? And the service being up doesn't necessarily give you a lot of advantages if it's slow, if you can't, spin up or down additional resources based on workloads that are going on. But again, that's kind of the availability piece of it, and that's what you'll find with other cloud providers. We go beyond that. Now, again, so I talk about manageability and performance. The performance being, again, does it work as expected? Again, getting to it and it being, 10 times slower than normal doesn't do you any good or your customers good. So we'll give you SLAs around the performance of the system as well. And then, of course, the manageability, is storage error free? Can you spin up or down additional computer database instances when you need to? That'll all be wrapped into one. And what's even more exciting and beneficial of that is we don't account for planned downtime as something that actually counts against you. So anything that is planned, aka you get an email saying a service is going to be down, is not factored out of the SLAs like other cloud providers. You get an email from Amazon saying they're taking the network down to fix something. That doesn't count as downtime in their world. In ours, that actually would. We talk about autonomous data management. Obviously, there's a lot of advantages to it. Everybody talks about, the performance side of it and how it's increased that for partners and for Oracle itself. Talk about the additional, security around, patching, backup, all of the things that make it much more, secure, trusted, and beneficial for you as well. Another one, though, is the ability to really cut back on costs. And we're not saying that you're going to, fire or get rid of DBAs or other people that are administering your database, but wouldn't it be great, instead of having them just do, standard maintenance, backup, patching, they were actually able to put them on more high value resources, such as, development, new features, onboarding, new customers. So, great ability for you to redeploy, costly resources with autonomous as well. We've already highlighted security. Let me talk about deployment flexibility. Oracle's actually, one of the few providers that will give you, with the same product, the ability to run your solution on-premise, to run it in the Oracle public cloud, to run it in other clouds as well. You can go run Oracle database in Azure and AWS. You can't go run some of those products anywhere else. Talk about some lock-in. Oracle doesn't do that to you. And then very exciting is Clouded Customer, the ability to get the exact same solution that we run our public cloud on, behind your firewall in your own data center. If you're in a highly regulated industry, you've got your own security issues, or maybe you've got certain country needs where nobody's got a public cloud for you to run in. We give you a solution to do that with Clouded Customer. So one solution runs across all of those. The enterprise customer base that we have, I think it's from really twofold. One, your ability to market to it and leverage that, as an opportunity to grow your business. Second, and just as important, again, something that will give you the trust factor, that our public cloud actually can run, a high workload, incredibly scalable and secure set of workloads, and we can do that for you as well. And then lastly, before I move on, I mentioned kind of what we called, the ease of purchase, earlier, the ability to transact with Oracle. And it's a concept that's called universal credits. So a lot of cloud providers, you have to decide what you want to buy. You have to decide how much you want of each service. You have to decide which data centers you may run in. And you end up with a very complex contract. You end up with different costs if you're deploying in different data centers in the US, especially if you start to go to data centers outside of the US. We have a concept called universal credits. You buy a bucket of credits from us. You can run any service that is available or will become available without redoing your contract. And you know exactly what that service is going to cost you anywhere in the world. As an ISV, that price predictability is important for you as you price your product, and you obviously size your product and sell it and go to market. So a very easy to use concept and construct. And then I'll mention BYOL. I know we have a lot of partners with us today that actually have been Oracle partners for a while and already have an investment in Oracle on-premise licenses. We give you incredibly attractive pricing to leverage those licenses in the cloud, either straight on compute, network and storage, and still manage it yourself. But more excitingly and more important is to move to the platform as a service, such as autonomous database, where you'll gain all the true benefits of what the cloud is and what the cloud promises for you. And as a result, you can really see the types of partners that we're actually bringing to the cloud. I'll let you look at these, and I'm sure you'll recognize a lot of these folks, and you'll see them, everything from security providers to business applications, people that are doing construction software, airline software, railroad software. You'll see kind of a cross-section of everybody here in terms of what they do. And what we really hear from them, again, why are they moving? Our second gen cloud, the security, the price performance, and the cost advantages that they're seeing. An open ecosystem, other partners that are there to support them, from third-party providers to systems integrators, and portability, so they know they're not going to get locked in. The ability for rapid data center expansion and their international growth, that picking a cloud provider that picks up with them. And then lastly, go to market. I think Oracle has a very unique advantage there, to leverage things like our SaaS portfolio to integrate in, extend, and enhance our SaaS products so that you can then leverage and go to market to those customers as well. And one thing that's very important and we're very excited about is the Oracle Cloud Marketplace. The Oracle Cloud Marketplace is really a directory of curated products that you can actually list your software on and market to the Oracle customer base. You can do that either in a manner such as if you're integrated into our marketing automation, to expand, talk about, and highlight what you do with our marketing automation tool, give tools, resources, videos, demos, customer ratings, expose all of that to our customer base, and even our sales force and other partners that sell our products as well. But you actually have the ability to go farther with that. If your solution is, the type of product that actually is deployable inside of a customer's cloud tenancy, instead of, say, being a SaaS product, you can actually use what we call our OCI console and list your products right inside of the same place that customers go to find Oracle services to spin up and deploy Oracle Cloud, and list your product to where customers have the ability to select your security, or your data management, type products and deploy those directly for you. And as a result, you have the ability to leverage Oracle as a deployment vehicle, or what is actually really exciting, we talked about those universal credits. Customers can actually leverage those to purchase your product as well. So we'll help you sell your solution, and then obviously remit that payment back to you. So great way to expand, get visibility for your product, to ease deployment for your product to customers, and then of course even to sell your product if you're interested in that. So very interesting, very exciting opportunity for our partners. So let me real quickly just close here on a couple of items around the resources that we provide for you to be successful. First and foremost is I would encourage you, if you're not already, to look into what we call the Oracle Partner Network, or you'll hear it abbreviated as OPN, where we really created a very simplified and streamlined program focused on cloud first for our partners to actually come engage with Oracle. Obviously, the one here in the upper left is what we're focused on today around cloud build track, or how do you develop solutions and IP on the Oracle Cloud. We obviously have tracks as well for those types of partners that do services or implementations, partners that sell, and then of course we still have our very large and active base of licensed kind of on-prem and hardware partners as well. But this will give you all the tools that you need to get enabled, to get educated, to develop your product and get to market very quickly, and it's all for a very easy to understand and a very economical manner. So if you're interested in that, again, the Oracle Partner Network, oracle.com/partner network. And then kind of what we want to focus on with you here, and again, I'll call this out at the end of next steps that I'm going to encourage you to take, because this is what we really want to, offer up to you, as we start that journey in the cloud with you. Kind of talk about it in three pillars, right? The technical side, how do we do everything that we can to get you educated, to get you hands-on and to get you in development, ported, live, and available on the Oracle Cloud. We have a whole set of technical solutions to do that. The commercial side, we've talked about the ability to leverage, our unique purchasing models, our licensing portability, and then more importantly as well, very open, easy to understand commercial models that will align to how you want to go to market, whether you want to be a SaaS provider, whether you want to have the customer, make their own platforming decisions. We'll have all of those opportunities available to you in a very easy, to onboard and easy to understand process. And then, as I mentioned, the go-to-market piece of it, a lot of things that you would expect around how we do branding, PR, awareness with you, how we'll promote you through the Oracle Cloud Marketplace, how we'll also do internal promotion of your solution to Oracle's thousands of sellers that are looking for third-party solutions to help them drive Oracle Cloud infrastructure growth and usage. And then as you're successful, how we will help you promote, your, PR, your case studies, articles, and other types of, events and activities that you will engage with Oracle, or just put on and promote yourself as well. So again, we have the ability to get you started, enter into, the way you want to go to market, and then help you go to market, to find more customers in working with Oracle as well. So let me turn over to Matt Chivers now, where we'll talk a little bit about, the second part of Oracle's journey itself to the cloud via, some of our application products. And Matt will share some of the processes and highlights and success stories of how we've done that. Matt?
All right, thanks so much, David. Appreciate the introduction, appreciate everyone's time here today. Would hope to spend the next maybe 10, 15 minutes just sharing some additional perspective on Oracle's own migration of both our natively developed and the number of acquired applications to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. So I want to provide some perspective in terms of how we've done that. Hopefully make clear to you why we see this as particularly relevant for our ISV partners and particularly important to share with them about. And then also highlight some ways in which we may assist you going forward as you're looking to move more and more of your intellectual property to the public cloud, as you're looking to evolve and optimize your application architectures ultimately for cloud-based deployment. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So I'll briefly reset for those of you who may not have joined for our prior installment here in the Cloud Talk series. We started by looking at the full portfolio of applications that comprise Oracle Global Business Units. So these are vertically integrated units within Oracle, typically aligned to a specific industry. In total, there are more than 60 application suites. Underneath that, there are literally hundreds of discrete application modules. If you look just at the scope and scale of our business here, more than 16 million users around the world, both consuming these applications on premises, as well as in many instances already, or previously I should have said, as cloud-based subscription services. And then you can look at the coverage we have across a number of key, large, and in many cases still rapidly growing vertical industries. Next slide, please. Moreover, if you look at the scope of those deployments in total, so again, bearing in mind that our GBU applications portfolio is comprised of both natively developed and acquired applications, we were deploying those applications for customers on a global basis across 80 data centers, so 80 distinct physical facilities running on more than 100,000 physical cores. So these are not only large applications in and of themselves, large scale deployments, in many cases running mission critical workloads for enterprises, as I said, on a global basis. Also important to recognize, these were applications that were designed and developed in different ways, using different technologies, different design patterns. Some were further along, perhaps in their migration to cloud-based deployment, or were designed using patterns and architectures that were more suitable to cloud-based deployment. In other circumstances, we were taking traditional applications that were architected at a point in time when public cloud deployment was not even an option. Also, quite a lot of complexity in terms of end customer requirements, and moreover, particularly in industries where there are often very stringent regulatory requirements and standards, a number of requirements that are around related compliance. So if we look at HIPAA in healthcare, for example, PCI, certainly for very highly transactional applications and workloads, particularly in the financial services sector, GDPR across the European Union, FedRAMP, obviously very important for US federal government entities. So quite a lot of complexity here for us to take on, not just in terms of the sheer numbers of applications, but also the numbers of customers, the scale at which they're running, and the diversity of requirements. Next slide, please, David. And something I want to call attention to, if it's not already come through clearly, and maybe even if it has, I think it probably bears repeating. And I've mentioned as much on our prior cloud talk. We want for our partners and prospects to understand that Oracle Cloud Infrastructure is not simply something we recommend or prescribe to others. It's actually the way in which we are delivering our own applications. So as certain of our leaders are fond of saying, and I think it's very well put, there is no hypocrisy in our model. There's no hypocrisy in our approach. Again, it's not just something that we would suggest our ISV partners should take on board. It's actually something that we are doing ourselves. And as we have been going through this journey, we have been looking for ways in which to externalize what we've done, what that journey has looked like, our lessons learned, what we see as best practices. And so that's a lot of what we're covering here is output from that journey. So at the outset, one of the very first things we did was to take inventory of all of the discrete application modules, to understand their respective architectures, to understand, moreover, the customer segments into which they were sold, particularly where there might have been very specific regulatory compliance requirements, and then to also further identify how we wanted to move those applications forward. And this is a fairly basic framework. I'll be able to put a finer point on it as we go. But we really thought first in terms of, at least here, what we characterize as cloud maturity. The basic idea is that we want to first understand, as we are moving these applications to public cloud, moving them to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI, where and how do we want for those applications to initially land? And broadly, we see there as being three options or scenarios. The first is what we refer to here as hosted. Fairly basic concept. We're looking at an application. We may assess that based on the engineering effort and investment and time required to do more significant refactoring or optimization of that app, we simply want to take it as is, move that across Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, likely just deploying that directly into a virtual machine. So really no substantive changes to the applications. In every other respect, it looks like an on-prem deployment. You're simply substituting the premise deployed physical infrastructure for virtualized infrastructure. In a sense, you could sort of think of that as the shortest or most direct path from here to there. We just want to land the application on OCI. A second scenario is one in which we may actually discern opportunities to, on an incremental basis, start consuming some of the specific or unique capabilities of the infrastructure and platform services to which we're migrating the app. So where, for example, we may be able to take advantage of lifecycle automation, particularly in the form of automated tuning and patching and upgrades, where there are other lifecycle management capabilities that may over time help to reduce a lot of the operational overhead and cost of hosting that application now in the public cloud. And then finally, what we would see is maybe a more optimal, and in many cases, a longer term end state is something we refer to as cloud native. So here the idea is that you're doing more than simply incrementally updating or changing or modernizing an application. In many cases, this looks like a full rewrite of that application. So how can we ensure that from the ground up, we're designing and deploying a version of the app that is uniquely tuned for public cloud deployment? So where, for example, we can build inherently into the architecture of that application the ability to do cross-region replication, right, across multiple data centers on a worldwide basis. How can we ensure that on a go-forward basis, we're implementing agile development methodologies, CI/CD pipelines, as well as implementing microservices-based architectures and serverless functions, just to name a few. Next slide, please. So really what you're seeing here is simply a more granular version of the three broader scenarios that I had just described. And I'll not go through each of them in detail, but it is important to understand that when we look at a hosted model, a cloud optimized model, or perhaps longer term, a cloud native model, these can be broken down into more discrete design patterns and technical steps. And this was also a very important phase of our process. Ahead of actually initiating the migration work, we wanted to identify and work back from what is the cloud maturity level that we are first aiming for, right? How do we want for this application to land on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure? And underneath that, what are some of the actual migration options? And as we go through these, and as we have gone through these, this has helped us to further identify what kinds of resources do we need to bring to bear? What are the expertise and skill sets that are going to be critical? And moreover, how do we get those resources deployed across such a large portfolio of applications and existing customers? A notable example, one of our global business units is comprised entirely of our NetSuite business. NetSuite is an application set that was in fact from the ground up designed for SaaS or cloud-based deployment. So there were already aspects of that application architecture that lent themselves very well to this sort of a migration. Notably, for example, having multi-tenancy designed into the application platform. So in that instance, we were able to do more than simply deploy existing production instances of NetSuite into virtual machines on OCI. We could go a step further. We could look at ways in which to start consuming database as a service, to start taking on board some of the additional value-added capabilities that come from consuming those kinds of platform services, not just deploying directly to the infrastructure. So one example, however, I think it's illustrative insofar as it would hopefully give you a better understanding of the thinking that we went through, and how we made these evaluations and how we then subsequently determine which particular migration option would be best for each particular application in that GBU portfolio. Next slide, please. So next, what I want to do is to highlight some best practices that we have found and learned along the way, and hopefully these would have some applicability in your businesses as well. And as I mentioned, even at the outset, we're always very interested in getting directly engaged with you, our ISV partners, looking at ways in which we can further share this sort of information, give you more and more direct access to technical expertise and resources on our side who have actually been directly involved in these projects, and in doing so, hopefully advise on your journey as well. So one of the first lessons learned here, and I suspect it's probably already come through by now, but it's to create roadmaps. We recognize that there are different, maybe even innumerable pathways to cloud, but we do think that there are some defined end states or destinations that you want to first have in mind. And ultimately what you want to do is work back from those. All other things being equal, one of our basic planning assumptions was, as we were inventorying those 60 plus application suites, we should probably start, all other things being equal, with a basic migration to infrastructure. Start with that hosted model, or what is very often referred to as lift and shift. Certainly in cases where we could further identify opportunities to start consuming additional cloud capabilities, notably services such as Oracle Database Cloud Service, as has been the case with NetSuite. We wanted to prioritize those as well. But again, our sort of default assumption or our basic premise was we would likely want to start, in the interest of time, expediency, and engineering investment, with that hosted model. Of course, once you land those applications on infrastructure, or in our particular case, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, you can start to look for other ways in which to modernize the applications, to upgrade your platform. You may even start to look at new capabilities that may surround your application that you could, in fact, build leveraging a set of cloud native technologies and design patterns. But again, the idea is make certain you have a defined end state or destination already in mind, work back from that destination, and really use that to determine how your migration is going to go. Next slide, please. This is something that really has been critical for us. It's been hugely helpful. I and others I know have heard this consistently reinforced by our development and product management leaders. Really important to, amongst your technical staff, so that is to say, the technical resources who within your organization are responsible for core application development, migrating applications to cloud, optimizing application architectures for cloud-based deployments, to really recognize and acknowledge, we refer to them here as early adopters, right? But development experts, technical staff within your organization that are in effect, or may be seen as blazing trails, right? They're getting skilled in new deployment models and design patterns. They're investing time to learn about new technologies, looking at ways in which they can improve how your applications run in the public cloud. So really important to identify those resources, to give recognition for the work that those resources are doing. And then moreover, what you want to do is to encourage an increasingly collaborative approach. You want to build out for maybe a core set of cloud technical experts, and then really disseminate that knowledge as quickly as you can across greater numbers of developers, and again, technical expertise within your organization. And then, of course, you want to the extent possible, document the work that they're doing, look for elements and patterns that may be reusable, and then replicate those across other applications, other migration projects, other development initiatives. So really important to build this sort of community, identify those early adopters, establish your sort of core technical leadership and staff, and then grow out from there. Next slide, please. Again, a recurring theme for us, but recognizing that different applications, again, are going to have different requirements. They may have different dependencies on platform and infrastructure services based on the way in which, in some cases, maybe even years ago, they were initially architected. Others may also have specific requirements based on the end users to whom you're selling these apps that are defined in terms of vertical industry regulations, compliance, and so on. So again, ensure that you aren't taking a sort of monolithic approach or operating under the assumption that all of my applications need to land in the same way in the public cloud at the same time, right? You need to be flexible in your approach. And again, to reiterate, once you understand what your near term and then maybe longer term end state may look like, or destination, as and when you move these applications to the public cloud, work back from there. Now, if we recognize that ultimately the preferred end state for all of our applications, insofar as we're deploying them in the public cloud, would be to have them running cloud native architectures, wherever you may land in the near term, ensure that this is something you're focused on, or I should say, ensure you don't lose focus on what that more ideal end state might look like, even after the fact you've got your application migrated to public cloud, you're provisioning and running production and customers. That's great. Don't stop, don't rest there. There are a number of ways in which you may look to build out next gen versions of those same applications. And as and when you do, you should also find that you're able to run them more cost efficiently, very often at greater levels of scale and performance, and also very often more securely than you might otherwise have been able to simply proceeding with more sort of a legacy-based architecture. So again, ensure you've got a view to the future. A lot of work in many cases just to get to public cloud, but that isn't necessarily the end of the story. And as part of this as well, I think there's great opportunity for you to further invest in your technical staff, right? Help them to up-level their skills, help them, encourage them to invest in learning new, more modern technologies and design patterns. And that in and of itself, it can also be a great retention strategy as well. These are hugely valuable resources. This is your intellectual property, your critical competency. You want to bring those resources along as you look to grow your business, as you look to mature and modernize your product set. Next slide, please. So just in brief summation here, and then I'll hand it back over to David to close us out. What we've learned along the way, and do bear in mind this is a journey. It's a journey that we're excited to share externally, and in particular with our ISV partners, because we think it's especially relevant for other software companies, many of whom are themselves progressing along that same journey, maybe to varying degrees and at varying speeds, but we want to share what we've learned, and we want to help you to do the same. We want to make certain that you have an understanding of these best practices, and again, where we may be able to bring not just our differentiated cloud services to bear, but additional resources and expertise who can advise you in a very focused manner. So as I mentioned, be sure that you understand there are a range of options in different cloud maturity models. Not an infinite number, right? There are many pathways, but ultimately we believe that there are, at a high level, sort of three ways in which you can land your applications on public cloud, at least as a starting point. Some may be more or less realistic, again, depending on the current state of your applications, the way in which they've been architected, what you would evaluate as the engineering effort or investment to get them there. But you want to start with that perspective before you even start in on the migration work, right? Really important. You want to baseline where those applications are at, as I mentioned. You want to have clarity in terms of the way forward. And again, really can't overstate the importance of this piece. Identify your technical experts early on, recognize the work that they're doing, establish them within your organizations as leaders, and then really encourage them to further collaborate with their peers, share best practices, look for reusable patterns and replicable models to accelerate your migration. So again, stay tuned. We'll continue to externalize more and more of the Oracle at Oracle Cloud Infrastructure story. There's a lot of great content already out in the public domain. I know David's going to highlight where you can find some of that, and we'll look forward to working with you. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks, Matt. So as Matt mentioned, there's a lot of very valuable material that Oracle is putting together and sharing specific to what we've done in our journey to the cloud. And I'd actually recommend kind of starting off with the Oracle at Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Story white paper that you can see here. You can see the URL, blogs.oracle.com/cloud-infrastructure. And what this will really do is kind of give you some of the deep dive and double click, as you would say, behind what Matt actually shared today. So talk about kind of a little bit more about, why we've done it, the technical planning that was required in advance. Obviously, you really want to do that before you take a headlong approach into actually doing the work. Is as important as the technical. People often forget the business planning and how that's going to change everything from org structures to customer experience, financial models, contracts, different types of things you'll need there, how to absolutely execute against it, and then obviously measure and continue to improve is very important. So again, Oracle's done a great job of this in terms of how we've actually done a great summation, and would encourage you to go take a look at it and see what we may be able to help you in your journey to the cloud as well. So let me end with that is where do we go next? Hopefully you've heard some exciting things, in terms of the Oracle Cloud, types of partners that are using it, how it can be of benefit for you based on your business model, what your peers are doing, and even, of course, how Oracle's been able to take this journey itself. So let's talk a little bit about, next step. First, I'd love you to think a little bit, and I'm sure you all have. Everybody's really got a cloud methodology and framework that they're putting in place, but identify which of your applications, are a target for migration, whether they be on-premise to the cloud, colo, kind of private data center to the cloud, or another potential public cloud provider, that you feel you could improve on your experience. Second, kind of come to us and let us do that technical and architectural review. Before we get anything hands-on, before we give you an environment and you try to play and see what it looks like, how it works, let's actually put together a plan, and an evaluation for what success would look like, how you would actually take that, and let us scope that out with you in a way that you're confident and comfortable. Third would then be that hands-on work. Let us actually prove this out to you, both functionally that it works, as well as the performance side, and the scalability component of it as well, to where you can actually see the type of experience, and the improvements you will get in working with Oracle as well. And then, of course, as that comes to completion, let's look at the business benefit side of that, how we can actually help you in the cost modeling, cost pricing that you might deliver, go-to-market opportunities, all of the things that'll work, after you've actually done the technical work, how you actually now take this to market and benefit, as it says here, for your business, but as we all know, benefit for your customers as well. So with that, I'd really like to thank everyone for spending, the last 45 minutes or so with Matt and I. Hopefully you found this valuable. We look forward to seeing you on future versions of Cloud Talk, where we'll continue with other topics that are of interest and importance, to our current and our prospective ISV partners. With that, have a good afternoon. And again, thank you for your time.